1920s, when it received its premiere by the Carl Rosa Touring Company at Edinburgh's Lyceum Theatre in 1894. Its assimilation of Wagnerian idiom is in itself impressive. Occasionally the score may display moments of undigested, near imitation, but in essence MacCunn has grasped the art of through composition and dramatic concentration far better than others many years his senior. Jeannie Deans was the first appearance of a Scottish through-composed opera based on a novel by Sir Walter Scott, whose works had already been widely pilfered by continental composers. The work was seen, in opera terms at least, as Scott at last coming home to his own part of the fairest isle. MacCunn's librettist was the critic Joseph Bennett, who was a keen champion of Dvorak and who collaborated with several British composers with varying success. But with the adaptation of Scott's The Heart of Midlothian, Bennett excelled himself. There is effective characterization of both class and individual, a genuine pathos, and a tense plot which grips us right up to its cliffhanger finale. In short, Jeannie Deans reflects and expands upon the very best of the British operatic tradition, without any of its accustomed mawkish sentimentality. So who was this opera's fiery young Scots composer? Born in 1868, the son of a well-to-do shipowner, MacCunn was among the first intake of scholars to grace Grove's newly opened Royal College of Music in 1883. His highly strung temperament was celebrated. He did not shrink to cross swords with teachers twice his age, such as Parry and Stanford. Hardly surprising when one considers the intensity of MacCunn's youthful output. His early overtures were being performed at the Crystal Palace by the time he was 17. No fewer than 3 cantatas were performed in 1888, the year MacCunn became a fledgling professor at the Royal Academy of Music. But though MacCunn continued to compose, his work as a light operatic conductor and teacher gradually quelled his fire. In 1914, he was nominated to head the proposed new musical academy in Edinburgh, but war intervened, and MacCunn died in 1916, aged only 48, before any such project could be realized. For Jeannie Deans, we go back 2 centuries, to the reign of King George I, when Scotland was politically volatile and the Jacobean cause by no means dead. Davy Deans, Jeannie's father, is a Cameronian, a strong-willed Scottish free churcher whose fierce, proud independence sets him against the established order. He has 2 daughters. The younger, Euphemia or Effie, who's not yet 18, has already had a full-blooded affair with the freebooting outlaw known as Geordie Robertson, whose real, and curiously aristocratic-sounding, surname is Staunton. We begin outside Davy's cottage. A lively Scottish dance is underway as villagers observe the arrival of the Laird of Dumbydykes, a prosperous landowner who is unsuccessfully courting the elder daughter, Jeannie. The Laird, sung by David Ellis, now refers to the edict which hangs over Effie's head. Scandal! She has secretly had a baby, which has suspiciously disappeared, or maybe been abducted. Rumour has got out, and the constables are on their way to arrest her on a charge of child murder, a capital offence for which poor Effie must pay with her life. But Dumbydykes has his mind on other things. As the crowd falls hushed, he sings instead a tribute to the qualities of Jeannie. If not quite the prince and the pauper, it is at least a case of the laird and the milkmaid.
loves me. Oh, woe's the day. Full many a weary mile I ride to find my hand at her dear side. But when I ask her for my bride, she says me nay. I love, alas, that's fair to see, but much I doubt if she loves me. Oh, woe's the day.
Poor chap. Despite his jollity, Dumpy Dykes doesn't sound too hopeful. No wedding bells for him. Davy Deans, the father of Effie and Jeannie, is an awesome patriarchal figure who treats the crowd to a sermon on decency and virtue, powerful dramatic irony, given the tragedy that is about to enfold the household. Jeannie shoos the dancers away, and Dumpy Dykes enters the cottage with her father. She is unaware the law is already poised to take its course at the expense of her sister, but is nonetheless full of foreboding and apprehension. What has Effie done with the baby, which she's been at such pains to conceal? Bedraggled and trembling and speaking in almost a whisper, Effie, sung by Susan Bullock, appears. Though not yet recovered from childbirth, she cannot bring herself to confess the obvious to her sister, let alone admit this disgrace to her severe but loving father. Jeannie, sung by Tinuke Olafimihan, insists Effie tell her the truth in her dead mother's name. In a tense moment of revelation, Effie rips the maiden's snood from her own head. It is true. Her virtue is no more. She has had a child. So, the truth is out at last, and Jeannie now prizes from Effie that the baby's father was none other than her beloved, the outlaw Geordie. But worse is to come. Effie's baby has disappeared. Jeannie instantly realizes what that could mean in the law's eyes. Enter a formidable constable, sung by Graham Danby, to arrest Effie, or more ominously, to collect the body of Euphemia Deans, charged with the murder of her child. Davy now emerges from the house, and at once springs to Effie's defence. Though the constable's words ring terribly on his ears, he will not for a second believe them. But as he seeks reassurance from Jeannie's eyes, the awful possibility is borne home to him. Baby, child murder, and with a dreadful cry, the ox-strong Davy collapses.
but now my Effie has no part nor lot with you. I take not back the words. Ye are not charged with murder, nor on those that love you falls the curse of a dishonored name. Forgive my pride, these knees have never bent to man. Oh, would I your pardon crave? I, a father, old, crushed down and shamed, who ne'er again will lift his poor grey head.
Despite such heart-rending pleading, public shame at last gets the better of Davy. Though Effie's guilt is still unproven, her father embarks on a terrible curse upon his besmirched daughter. Calling her a vile harlot, he rashly casts away the one thing he loves most, an act of hubris which now makes him, and the very values to which he so rigidly yet admirably clings, a tragic focus of the opera. And poor Effie, a condemned woman, is hauled off to jail. At the start of Act 2, we are at a forlorn burial spot on some blasted heath. Here we meet Madge Wildfire, sung by Linda MacLeod, a Hardy-esque mad woman who hints she knows something about the baby's disappearance. Madge chants grotesquely beside the grave of a hanged felon. Old Nick killed his wife, but who killed the band? The splitting hyena cackles of this bewitched fire hag are certainly enough to send shivers down my spine. Jeannie's not too keen on them either. She has come at Madge's summons, and hastily invokes God's protection as she's left alone in this accursed spot, deep in the eye of the gathering storm. Unbeknown to Jeannie, this bizarre rendezvous was arranged by Effie's lover, Geordie. He confirms to her that Effie is innocent. The baby has been abducted and, he believes, slain by others as a gesture of revenge upon him. Jeannie is drawn ever deeper into the plot as Geordie demands that she tell a white lie, claiming Effie confessed her pregnancy to her. Dilemma, for Jeannie, that paragon of truth, cannot bring herself to do so, yet her refusal means that Effie must die. Will she now have her own sister's blood on her hands? Meanwhile, in Edinburgh's Tolbooth prison, ironically known as the Heart of Midlothian, Effie mourns her lost childhood and innocence and sings herself to sleep in truly exquisite fashion. What a ravishing lullaby. It almost beats Berlioz at his own game. But suddenly all hell breaks loose. A lynch mob has broken into the jail. The famous Porteous riots have erupted. Amongst the gang is her beloved Geordie, creatively dolled up as Mad Madge. He's not merely popped in to say a brief hello, though. He plans to spirit Effie out of prison altogether. Yet Effie, like her sister, is made of stern stuff. After a few moments of rapture, she makes up her mind. Until the charges are dropped, she stays where she is. Having thus seen off her lover, Effie devotes the next scene to a showdown with her sister. "You decline to save me with a wee lie. Don't come moping to me now," she sneers, and bids Jeannie go tend our aged father, lest he droop beneath a fatigue of cursing. Poor Jeannie. She feels utterly rejected. She can't just do nothing. But what can she do? Suddenly a wild idea comes into her head. She'll go to London. She'll get Effie a royal pardon. The Queen, she's a woman, she'll understand. It's the only hope. No chance of taking a night sleeper, even in those days. That means a long, long trudge, Shank's pony, all those 400 miles to London. Can she do it? Geordie, that positive pimpernel of disguises, comes to Jeannie dressed as a priest and bids her contact the Duke of Argyll when she reaches London, for he's a friend to the Scots and known to have the royal ear. Jeannie then goes to her would-be admirer, Dumbydykes, and wheedles money from him to assist with her journey. True love, he learns even as his idol rejects him, is unselfish. Jeannie now makes her famous trek south to London town. To her, it might as well be the other end of the world. To the strains of Handel's water music, we find her in Richmond Park, where she's led by Argyll, sung by Jamie McDougall, into the presence of an unusually distinguished lady. Jeannie pours out her grief-stricken tale to this lady and her smart companion, sung by Anne Hetherington. The lady herself, sung by Linda MacLeod, seems unusually sympathetic, but who the dickens is she? so, brave Jeannie has met the Queen herself, and her masterly singing seems to have had the desired impact. Meanwhile, the hour of Effie's execution is approaching. Effie seeks forgiveness of her father, and he, a chastened man by now, does not hesitate to give it. They will meet soon in a better place. A whistle blows as Geordie incites the mob to attack the guards. A fight develops, but with riflemen on the other side, the odds are hopeless, and a massacre now seems inevitable. Suddenly, a cheer erupts. A horse-drawn coach in Argyle's colours approaches, with Jeannie riding shotgun. Gaily she waves the reprieve. The execution is off. Effie is saved. But as Effie falls into Geordie's arms, the guards quickly move to arrest this notorious rebel for sedition and murder. But now for a final coup de théâtre. Jeannie produces a second pardon for Geordie. His father is none other than the recently deceased Lord Willingham, and Geordie, now George Staunton, is an outlaw no longer, but has inherited a desirable title. After many mishaps, we are at last back on the rails. Now there's no backtracking, and as the happy couple are blessed by Davy Deans, Staunton leads Jeannie forward for a bow, while the crowd let off steam with loud cheers and applause. Immortal fame to Jeannie Deans is the universal cry.
Let's
and if MacCunn's opera, despite a few worthy revivals, gradually faded from view, Jeannie Dean's name happily did not, being commemorated in a plucky 440 steam locomotive which plied the North British line between Edinburgh and Aberdeen from 1909 to 1949. It's interesting to note, incidentally, that the real Duke of Argyll was to be the librettist of MacCunn's next two operas. Pure coincidence? In that performance of Jeannie Dean's by Hamish MacCunn, the part was sung by Tinuke Olafimihan. Susan Bullock sang Effie, and Peter Siddham the part of their father, Davy Deans. Jamie McDougall sang the role of the outlaw Staunton, and David Ellis the Laird of Dumbydykes. Madge Wildfire was Linda MacLeod, who also took the role of Queen Caroline. Anne Hetherington sang Lady Suffolk, and the awesome voice of the law was supplied by Graham Danby as the Constable, with the Scottish Opera Chorus and the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra conducted by Martin Brabhams. As a wayward student, Hamish MacCunn had a good few arguments with his tutors, not least the fiery Irishman Charles Villiers Stanford. Stanford's 10th and last opera, The Travelling Companion, is the subject of the last programme in this series of Britannia at the Opera. I do hope you'll journey along with me at the same time next week.
And you can join Roderic Dunnett next Monday at noon. The time is now 1 o'clock, and this is Paul Guinery with BBC Radio 3 Lunchtime News Summary. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kenneth Clarke, is to make a statement in the Commons this afternoon on the collapse of Barings Merchant Bank. The crash followed huge losses through unauthorised dealing by an employee in the bank's Singapore office. The Shadow Chancellor, Gordon Brown, has called for a full inquiry to discover whether the Bank of England should have stepped in earlier to prevent the collapse. The demise of Barings prompted a sharp drop in the 100 share index in early trading, but the market has rallied slightly. A short time ago it was down 19 at 30.19. Midland Bank made profits of £905 million last year, compared with £844 million the previous year. The improvement follows a huge fall in the amount lost through bad debts. Police in Belgium arrested 54 Chelsea Football Club supporters who arrived in the country for tomorrow's match against FC Bruges. Half have already been sent back on a ferry to Ramsgate, and the rest will be expelled later today. Most of the arrests were for public order offences and robbery. The President of Turkey, Süleyman Demirel, has cancelled a state visit to Bosnia following concerns about his safety. He was due to have a meeting in the capital Sarajevo with the Bosnian President Alija Izetbegovic. The Transport Secretary, Dr. Brian Mawhinney, has announced a crackdown on vehicles which pollute the atmosphere. Roadside checks of exhaust emissions will be carried out in more than 20 towns and cities over the next 2 months, and offenders will face fines of up to £2,500. The Royal London Hospital says the boxer, Gerald McClellan, remains in a critical but stable condition. The neurosurgeon who operated on him said his prospects of recovery were looking more hopeful. More than 60 paintings seized by Russian soldiers from private German collections at the end of the Second World War have gone on show in Moscow. The exhibition, which includes works by El Greco, Renoir and Goya, has sparked off a row with Germany, which wants the paintings returned. And finally the weather. It'll be mild and windy with rain in many parts. That's the news summary. Now 2 minutes past 1. It's time for this week's lunchtime concert, which comes direct from St John's, Smith Square. And here's Donald MacLeod to introduce it.